Bapak Ibu sekalian, selanjutnya setelah tadi kita sudah mendengarkan sambutan dari Bapak Uday Rayana, berikutnya kita akan bersama-sama menyimak pemaparan mengenai tren industri seluler yang akan disampaikan oleh Regional Vice President EPAC Open Signal, Mr. Rob Lerner. Please welcome Mr. Rob Lerner.
Everybody, and firstly a big thank you to Cellular for having me here to speak today. It's very nice to see some familiar faces from the industry as well. So I'm Rob Lerner, I'm Regional Vice President for APAC for OpenSignal, and we are becoming very rapidly the global standard for measuring mobile network experience across the industry. And I'm here today to tell you a little bit about how OpenSignal works, who we are, but also to explain how Indonesian mobile experience compares across the world, the region of Asia, and a little bit of insight into Indonesia itself. So OpenSignal, we are reporting publicly every 6 months in 35 countries, including Indonesia. We released a report last week which gave insight into national experience and 16 cities as well. I'm sure many of you read that report or saw articles in the media about it. We gather our reports using billions of measurements taken from real consumers across the world. The majority of those measurements are automated, which gives us a real insight into what's going on in many different locations and many aspects of mobile experience. And our independent approach means that we're trusted by all of the industry stakeholders, including operators, regulators, investors, and the media, and of course, the millions of consumers who choose which mobile operator they will use every day. So how does OpenSignal collect its data, and how do we turn that into useful insights? First thing we do is we have our applications, which you may be familiar with, OpenSignal and Meteor, both free to download apps available on iOS and Android devices. We also partnered with a number of different application providers in the industry to give ourselves a broader reach to millions more users, millions of locations, but also to non-techie users, so users of everyday applications. That allows us to capture information from those devices across all networks, all of the time, every day. And that means we're able to gather a huge amount of information from indoor locations, where the majority of us are using our phones today, which are perhaps not so easy to test in traditional ways. We then take all of that information and send it up into the cloud, where we turn data into useful insights and metrics that tell us more about consumer experience. And this is a critical area where data science is applied to ensure that what we're reporting is both relevant and accurate in terms of understanding how real people, real devices across the whole spectrum, new and old, experience networks today. And ultimately, we turn that information into free insights in our apps, public reports, which we share with the industry and media, and private analytics that industry stakeholders can subscribe to gather more information about what's going on in granular detail and localized level as well. Sorry, I lost my clicking there. Excuse me for a moment. I just wanted to touch on some of the things that are a little bit unique about in OpenSignal and mean you can really trust us as industry stakeholders. These may not seem obvious things to you, but independence is critically important. We're not owned by any specific industry stakeholder. We're a private company, so we have no agenda to promote any particular service provider's performance, results, or experience. We have a complete independence of our journalist team within our organization, which means they report on their cadence and on the topics that they feel are relevant to the industry. That means we can never change what we're doing for a commercial reason, however much money someone might offer us to promote their brand or their service. We also have a very sophisticated analytics approach and methodology. That means we often report draws, sometimes on results, because there is no statistical evidence that an individual has won a particular award. And that's critical to ensure that we keep representing the truth of what's going on. We also use a single methodology across the whole world. That means that you can compare what's going on in Indonesia with what's going on in peer countries like Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, India, but also compare to European markets and markets in the US and North America. Our methodology, last but least, is not designed to represent network capability or performance. And this is a critical thing. We are focused on how customers actually experience the internet through their devices. And that means we're looking at things, tests that represent the full end-to-end experience from device all the way to real content, such as YouTube or Google, popular content servers for consumers, from a broad and representative user base across many, many different locations. And we also focus on experiential analytics. So historically, we reported things like coverage, availability, speed, and latency. But last year, we launched a new innovative video experience metric, and we will soon focus on things like voice and gaming, which we believe are the next frontier in terms of understanding mobile experience and what consumers really care about when using a mobile network. So let me provide some global comparisons. What we're looking at here is an extract from a recent report we did just before the launch of 5G networks in Korea and the US. And what you can see is how 4G download speeds vary by time of day. So as you can imagine, in each country there's a different peak usage time and off-peak usage time. And we can see that off-peak, around 2, 3 in the morning, the average download speed subscribers experience is 22 megabits per second. But at peak time, in the evening, it's about half of that. And that's an indication of the impact of demand and congestion on mobile networks today across the world. If we then look into individual countries, we can see that there's a bigger story to tell and more variation. So clearly there's a similar kind of distribution with a different peak versus off-peak. If we look at Indonesia though, the difference is over 3x. Which means that typically networks here are under more strain and congestion than other markets. So that's obviously an area moving forwards where a technology like 5G can help increase capacity for Indonesian networks and Indonesian mobile subscribers. Here we're looking at actual peak speeds, average download speeds across different countries. And what you will see is that South Korea is top of the global rankings at around 50 megabits per second. And it is indeed the first country to have launched a large-scale 5G smartphone network. And what that indicates is that those countries that are advanced in investment are pushing the frontiers forwards. But the clearest business case or use case for 5G at the moment in non-standalone networks is capacity. And therefore, there is no reason that other countries like Indonesia cannot invest in 5G to improve mobile capacity and speeds. Here we're looking at latency, and latency is becoming an increasingly important metric with the increased demand for services like gaming. And of course, 5G is again designed to help consumers access lower latency and more advanced business models and use cases. Average latency in Indonesia is around 65 milliseconds, which is pretty comparable to what we're seeing in many other countries around the world. Another reference point might be perhaps Singapore, which has extremely low latency and comes highest in our global reports, under 40 milliseconds. So what's happening in Asia specifically? We did a recent analysis of leading cities across Asia and looked at video experience. Our video experience metric looks at things like video resolution, so comparing HD and SD videos. We also look at load time to start a video to start playing from when the initial frame is delivered, and stalling ratio, or buffering, as you may know it. Those are what the ITU standards tell us are the key issues impacting video experience for subscribers, which is obviously the largest volume of traffic on mobile networks today. And our scale here runs from 0 to 40, offers a kind of poor experience, so typically slow load times and lots of stalling occurrence, up to 75, which is what we define as excellent, an almost kind of perfect experience for consuming video. And you can see there are some advanced markets touching the very good quality level. Nobody has yet reached excellent level in any of our global reports for video experience, which means that today networks are not really ready for 1080p traffic. More investment is required to offer a true HD video experience to consumers. If I skip to download speed experience, we see a broader range here. The distribution in video was much narrower, but download speed, it becomes more separated. Obviously, we're not dealing in a scale here, but more absolute terms. But you can see at the lower end, Jakarta subscribers are getting a fraction of the speeds that their peers in Seoul and Singapore are experiencing. One interesting market that stands out there is Hong Kong. This is a very advanced market for 4G, offering a good video experience, but networks there are perhaps under capacity constraints, which means that subscribers are getting a typically slightly worse download speed experience. And now we can start to look at 5G. We've got initial data coming in from 5G markets, like Korea and the US and others that have launched recently. And what we're immediately seeing is that there is a reasonably significant improvement in download speeds experienced by 5G smartphone users versus average smartphone users, but less so compared to flagship 4G smartphone users. But I think we will see over time, as 5G services mature, more and more of a gap emerging between what can be experienced over 5G with newer devices versus the legacy networks. So this is very much a space to watch in the coming weeks. And if we look at upload speeds and latency, so far the information we're taking from 5G devices shows very little difference versus 4G. That's partially because, as I touched upon, with non-standalone 5G networks, there is no great impact to latency just yet. That will come in the next phase from 2020 onwards, when core networks are upgraded. And at the moment, upload speeds are probably configured by mobile operators to remain the same and focus their capacity more on the 5G download speeds. So let's look at the Indonesian market itself. So here we did an analysis of download speeds experienced across different cities. And you'll see it's quite interesting to note that some of the fastest cities are outside Java. And that might be counterintuitive. The majority of investment has probably gone into mobile networks within Java, where the majority of smartphone users and devices are resident. However, we've noticed that nearly all operators are increasing their investment outside Java, particularly in cities. And what we're seeing is capacity has increased, but most likely these average speeds that are higher will be a short-term phenomenon, as there's less demand and congestion on those networks. So this is a picture I expect to evolve over time. If we look at video experience, again, there's far less variation. So if the Indonesian consumer, as we would expect in other markets, is more focused on video experience than, say, a download speed of a file, then it's more likely that the difference in experience across different geographies is far smaller, and people are getting a somewhat similar experience. But once again, we can see a level of correlation with cities outside Java outperforming those within. If we look at 4G availability and latency, 4G availability is a measure of the time consumers get access to 4G networks, 4G services. So it's not quite the same as geographic coverage. It looks instead at the actual experience of the user within a given area. And if we correlate that with latency, we see a different story emerge. The ideal position to be on this graph is the bottom right. And at this point, we can see Java cities actually giving the best combination of access to LTE, which means more mature network deployments, and also lowest latency. And in fact, some of those cities we referred to with the fastest download speeds and video experience have got the slowest latency, which is probably more of a geographical caused issue, given that latency could be far greater when traffic needs to traverse across different geographies in an archipelago. So that's something we would also tend to expect to see. Okay, so looking at our recent report, I just want to highlight a couple of the results here. So if we look at the 4G availability category, which again, I want to emphasize, this is not a measure of geographic coverage. This is a measure of the time consumers get access to 4G. We can see SmartFriend is leading that category, which again is not surprising as it's a 4G only operator. If we look at the multi-technology operators, then all Indonesian operators have exceeded 80% in this latest report. And that's an indication that 4G access is maturing within Indonesia. So we would now expect to see this metric to move a little more slowly over time versus some of the dramatic improvements we've seen in our recent reports. If we look at download speed experience and video experience, we see a different story. And this is where Telkomsel starts to dominate the picture. And as you can see, there is both significant leadership in average download speeds and also on video experience. But again, the picture is slightly narrower around video experience. What I would say is there's definitely room for investment and improvement in these speeds and video experiences compared to regional and global peers. So I think we can all work together to get a better video experience for Indonesian consumers. If you want to understand more about our report and look more into the details, it's available on our website. We also report latency and upload speed experience in the report, and we also break that down into 16 different cities across the country. So this is a resource available for everybody to look at, including our historical reports as well, and I encourage you to take a look at those. So just to summarize, OpenSignal is measuring the real-world mobile network experience, and we're doing that independently. We create mobile analytics about Indonesia on a national basis, looking at each individual operator. We do it regionally, we look at city level, and we provide detailed analytics to our customers. Differences in the 4G speed between the busy hour and the quietest hour are pretty dramatic in Indonesia, which indicates that there is tremendous amount of usage on mobile networks here today. But there is a need for more capacity to offer a better mobile experience. Even the fastest operators in country in the region, and in fact in the world, are rolling out 5G, which tells you the industry has almost a never-ending thirst and demand for faster and better mobile experience to support richer and richer content. Indonesian users see a great variation in their mobile network experience today based on where they are and which operator they subscribe to. And our video experience scores show that there's a big difference between download speed and video. And I think as we start to launch more experiential metrics like gaming, we'll have another area to focus on in the mobile experience. So last but not least, before I finish, just want to again highlight to you that there's a number of different research pieces available on our website. They're free for you to access. And we'll be continuing to report in Indonesia with more and more insights sharing how mobile experience evolves in this market. Thank you very much.